Now, I thought this would be a good idea for a video during the international break. Essential players, players that should be absolute locks in your FPL teams. And I've got 7 of them to go through in this video. All right, I'm going to go through some defenders first then. And obviously, we've got the Arsenal defence that are simply the best performing defence in the league at the moment this season, right? So far, at the moment, they're the best defence in the league. Yes, they may have conceded 2 goals to Sunderland, but I wouldn't let just one fixture, completely put me off picking the Arsenal defence. For me, I think the best option is definitely Gabriel. He's up there with probably Haaland as literally the best pound-for-pound player in the game. He's getting returns this season through all different means. Goals, clean sheets, assists, defensive contribution points. He's getting the lot. So Gabriel, I think, he's absolutely essential. But I think with just how good the Arsenal defence are, you probably want to be at least doubled up in order to protect your rank if they keep a clean sheet. And just in general, they're so good defensively that I think you want to double up. Sensible options to double up. I don't really think there is a best option, really. All of Saliba, Timber, Calafiori, David Raya, they're all genuinely pickable. The one thing I probably would say about David Raya, it's a fair criticism that some might have of him, certainly in FPL anyway. He's a fine goalkeeper in real life, but it's just the fact that he doesn't really get saves points. So you're entirely reliant on clean sheets for him to score his points. And if he doesn't keep a clean sheet, he probably doesn't make enough saves to get the bonus points. And yeah, it doesn't really score any points other than that. But Arsenal concede so few goals and keep so many clean sheets that there's, that's not really a factor anyway, to be honest, because he keeps a clean sheet most games. But yeah, definitely a piece of the Arsenal defence. Probably 2, with Gabriel being number 1. And really take your pick of the other 4. I think there's not a whole lot to separate them. Next up, there's a category I think of defender at the moment that I would just call defensive contribution monsters. These are players that are picking up DEFCON pretty much every game, or at least averaging over the DEFCON threshold. If you didn't know, the threshold for defenders they have to get 10 clearances, blocks, interceptions and tackles combined to hit the DEFCON threshold in the game and score 2 points. Senesi, Chris Richards and Anderson are averaging that every 90 minutes. So that means every time they step out onto a football pitch, they should score at least 2 points from defensive contributions, which is obviously a really good factor when deciding who to pick in FPL. I think ultimately all 3 of these players are very decent. For me, I'd probably pick a couple of them for a bit of rotation, maybe even all 3. I'm close to having all 3 in my team, to be honest. Senesi from Bournemouth, yes, they've conceded goals in their recent games, but he's so consistent with his DEFCON points. Richards, I'd say of these 3 teams, Crystal Palace are probably the strongest defence. He's not the only Crystal Palace defensive option, but I do think at 4.5 million he's great value, and with a floor of basically 4 points from hitting DEFCON, he's a really good option in the game. Joachim Andersen, I don't think the Fulham defence is quite as good as the Crystal Palace one, but start him for a good fixture and I think he'll get you DEFCON and a clean sheet. And he is just, regardless of the team he plays in, particularly Andersen, even for his nation Denmark, he hits DEFCON for them as well when he plays for them. So all 3 of these defenders are pickable alongside the Arsenal defence. I think they pad out your team quite nicely. And just to round off the defenders, I genuinely think that there are a number of minimum price defenders in the game at the moment that are pickable. My pick would probably be Mukiele. He's offering a bit of goal threat. Sunderland looking pretty solid this season. And he's one of the top defenders in the game for averaging DEFCON. We've got here some Solio predicted points data. I'll leave a link to Solio in the description below. Bijol is top. I think he plays for Leeds. I'm not massively convinced on him. For me, I'd go for probably Mukiele, who is now up to 4.2 million. Obviously, quite a lot of people cottoning on to how good he is. I really like Joe Rodon too. Alderete could be good for Sunderland when he comes back from injury. Esteve from Burnley as well. Goodmanson from Leeds is getting decent minutes. I think I'd probably prefer Rodon. So yeah, that's kind of how I would look at it from the defence. I think you need a bit of the Arsenal defence. You need some of these DEFCON monsters, and you want some cheaper defenders, someone like Mukiele or Rodon to finalise your defence. I just wanted to quickly drop in a project I'm working on at the moment with my good mate FPL Tom, titled the FPL Cartel. If you want to join the FPL Cartel, there is a link in the description below. You'll get your first 30 days completely free of charge. And if you sign up, you get yourself an exclusive weekly podcast with both myself and FPL Tom. All of it is managed inside a private Discord where you'll have the opportunity to ask questions that will feature in the podcast. You'll be able to talk to us in real time. We'll give you some FPL advice and a bit of banter. Particularly, that's keeping me ticking at the moment during the international break, the people we got in the group there. And we're also going to do a members-only mini-league with some FPL Cartel merchandise to give away as well. So if you're interested in the FPL Cartel, link top of the description below and you get your first month totally free. Man United are about to embark on a really, really strong fixture run. We finished the defence section. I probably wouldn't back the Man United defence, so we're not going to talk about Man United defenders in this section. But we are going to talk about Man United options, attacking options in particular, because I think those fixtures are really good. They seem somewhat to be turning a corner to Man United from an attacking point of view. They seem to be scoring goals in most of the games that they play. And, well, I don't even need to read the fixtures out. You can see them on screen there. But coming up, the fixtures do look really good. I think it's almost impossible to deny that. And for me, my number one favourite FPL asset from Man United is Bruno Fernandes. To some, that might be controversial, but I just think so far this season, Bruno Fernandes has been a serial points dodger, and there's just no way in my mind that continues. He's missed 2 penalties, a few shots as well that have hit the post, and he's been unlucky with. He's creating, I'd say, more chances than assists he's actually got on as well. 5 attacking returns from 11 appearances so far. And what I like about Bruno Fernandes is he plays every game for 90 minutes. You never have to worry about Bruno Fernandes starting when you have him in your team. You just know he's going to play every game. And he can get returns through every single mean, right? So he's got 2 goals, 3 assists, so goals and assists. He takes penalties, he takes free kicks, and he's also pretty damn good for DEFCON as well. So he is averaging 10.47 DEFCON per 90 minutes. The cut-off for midfielders is slightly higher than defenders at 12, but he's getting close, if not hitting it in pretty much all of the games. The last couple of games, 9 and 8, very close. 15 against Brighton, 8 and 9 again. 11 against Brentford, 5 against Man City, not great. And then he hit it against Burnley and Fulham, and then 1 off against Arsenal. So you think of points dodging. Bruno Fernandes has hit 11 DEFCON twice. He's come close with 9 on some occasions as well. 8-9 is close-ish. So 8's quite far off, but you know what I mean. And he's missed 2 penalties. I feel like we'd all be having a different conversation about Bruno Fernandes if he scored those 2 penalties and maybe got 1 more sort of clearance block or ball recovery in a game, right? That's all it would take for him to be on a significant higher amount of points than he is. And one thing that's maybe overlooked about Bruno Fernandes at times is how he fares for bonus points in the game. Because he's so involved in every game that Man United play, both from a defensive point of view and an attacking point of view, he scores really well for the bonus point system. And he just, every time he gets an attacking return in a game, basically, he propels himself up the bonus points score, which I think is also something to bear in mind. So he literally gets returns through every means, right? Goals, assists, DEFCON, penalties, free kicks, and also potential bonus points in FPL beyond just the DEFCON as well. I think he's pretty much essential at the moment. Alongside Bruno Fernandes, I think there's a slot for another 8-point-something million midfielder, right? And I think, well, there's 2 that are emerging as the best options at this price point. One being Antoine Semenyo, who's obviously had a really fantastic start to the season. But his returns, well, they have petered off in recent game weeks, haven't they? But a player who's really turned it on in recent game weeks at a similar price is Bryan Mbeumo. Now, I'm not going to say one or the other, really, because I don't think there's a whole lot to separate them, right? When you look at the fixtures, their fixtures are of very, very similar quality for the next 3. I guess the only thing to bear in mind is that Mbeumo, I think, is off to AFCON, whereas Semenyo and Ghana didn't qualify, as I understand it. So he won't be going to AFCON with Semenyo, but Mbeumo will. So Mbeumo's got sort of 4 or 5 weeks left in your team, and then you have to sell him, whereas Semenyo, he's going to play all the way through the winter. But I do think on recent form, there's a strong case to go for Bryan Mbeumo. But then looking back at Semenyo, if he netted his penalty in game week 11, it'd probably be a different story and everyone would be wanting him in their team again. I'm not sure there's room for both in most people's FPL teams, but there's definitely room for one of these 2. Like I said, Bryan Mbeumo probably edging it at the moment in terms of recent form, but Semenyo in terms of maybe a long-term asset because he's not going to DEFCON, and he's obviously got more returns than Mbeumo has so far this season. Another midfielder that I absolutely love, Elevenify in FPL this season. 6.6 million. I think he is part of a category of midfielder just below those 8 million ones. I think there's a place in most people's teams for one, maybe two midfielders at this sort of 6.5 million price point. Elevenify is basically a mini Bruno Fernandes in my mind. A player that plays every game for Everton. He's dangerous from open play. He's got 4 goals, 1 assist. He takes penalties as well for Everton. And he's not a DEFCON machine, but he's a player that puts up more than the average number of DEFCON for a midfielder, right? He's averaging 10.04 per game, which is very similar to Bruno Fernandes. He's actually only hit it, unfortunately, on 3 occasions this season. Yeah, 3 occasions. He's come close on other ones. A few 8s, a few 9s in there. But yeah, similar to Bruno Fernandes, I just like the way in which he can get returns through very many different means, right? He's a solid starter for Everton, at least until he goes away to AFCON, which I think is Gameweek 16, if I'm not mistaken. So you have to bear that in mind. You can only really have him in your team for 4 weeks. But I mean, Man United, Newcastle, Bournemouth, Nottingham Forest as those fixtures. And Newcastle is at home for Everton. Obviously, Newcastle really poor away from home at the moment. Decent fixtures, I would say. And yeah, just going back to the point about returns through every different means. I mean, penalties, set pieces. I think he takes some free kicks. He's just really dangerous from open play. And he hits DEFCON. I really like Elevenify. And I'd say he's pretty much essential. He's my favourite at this price point. But there are plenty of other, alternative options that are around this price point. Looking at the Solio expected points data, Szoboszlai is actually the number 1 midfielder around this price point. For me, I'm not necessarily sure I like Szoboszlai. I also think he's on 4 yellow cards. Whilst his expected points are high, the 4 yellow cards would kind of put me off. I do think the next best thing at this price point is Ismaila Sarr. I watched him in the Brighton game and he could have had a goal and an assist within the first sort of 30 minutes. He looks so dangerous in that game. The only thing that would slightly put me off is Glasner talking about the fact he had a tight hamstring and he's obviously off for international duty, playing alongside Njai in the Senegalese team. So that is something to bear in mind, which means obviously he'll be off to AFCON as well. But yeah, Sarr and Njai at that sort of 6.5-ish million price point, I think one of those is pretty much essential at the moment. Right, forgive me. The next bit might be a little bit boring because you probably own these players already, but I genuinely think Jean-Philippe Mateta, alongside another player who we'll get onto, is probably the second best forward in the game at the moment. The fixtures that Palace have got, particularly for their next 3 fixtures, are really good. 6 goals from 11 appearances so far. He is the Crystal Palace penalty taker, and he's underperformed his expected goals data so far this season. He's got 8 XG and only scored 6. That might be annoying for people that have had him in their teams all season, but for me it just suggests that Crystal Palace are a team that are creating a lot of chances for Jean-Philippe Mateta, and if he put away all of the chances he got, he'd be on 8 goals from 11 games, which I think for an £8 million striker is really, really good value. He's going to play every game, I think, for Crystal Palace, so much so that his minutes are probably going to have to be managed just to keep him fit, to be honest. Nketiah is out with an injury at the moment, so I think Mateta's run in the team is fairly clear. The only downside to Palace is obviously they do have European competition mixed in, and their second best attacker, Ismaila Sarr, we just spoke about, is going away to AFCON, who might be someone who creates does quite a lot of play that creates chances for Mateta. So exactly how Palace play without Ismaila Sarr for a relatively long period of time remains to be seen. But I do think Jean-Philippe Mateta is pretty much essential. And that, of course, means alongside Erling Haaland. I'm not going to labour the point on Erling Haaland too much this season. 14 goals from 11 games, 15 attacking returns in the Premier League so far this season. He's off to a ridiculous start in terms of attacking returns. He's the best player in the game, without a doubt. I think in Game Week 12, there is slight shout, maybe because he's got Newcastle away, to captain someone else. But in pretty much every other week in FPL, he's the best captain. And I'd actually suggest in Game Week 13, when he plays Leeds at the Etihad, he could well be a triple captaincy shout. Don't need to say much more. He is just the best player in the game, isn't he? Now, I'm not necessarily saying these remaining players are absolutely essential. It's all down to how you want to play FPL, I think. But I do think Welbeck and Igor Thiago of Brentford at their price points are really, really decent FPL options. They've both put up decent level of returns this season. Thiago taking the lead over Welbeck due to his returns basically in Game Week 11. I'd say over the next 3 fixtures, Welbeck probably has the best games. He doesn't play Arsenal away like Igor Thiago does in Gameweek 14. But I'd say overall this season, I think I've preferred what I've seen from Igor Thiago. But if I were to describe what I think the best team in FPL looks like right now, I think it's either a 3-4-3 or a 4-3-3, where you load up on defenders with good defcon and clean sheet odds, or you go 3-4-3 with 4 good midfielders, and then probably 3 strikers. Well, obviously 3 if you're going 4-3-3, but you know what I mean. I've kind of talked through who I would have. You should get a good idea of who I'd have in the midfield. And up front, I think I'd have Haaland and Mateta are the 2 best forwards in the game. And then one of these to partner, I think, would be a pretty good idea. So yeah, one of Welbeck or Thiago quickly becoming fairly essential in FPL. And if you do pick 4 midfielders, well, that leaves a slot for a midfielder to go on your bench. And I think right now there are a couple of minimum price midfielders that you should pick, right? They're playing pretty much every game. One of them being Josh King from Fulham. He hasn't actually had, which I think is ridiculous, he hasn't actually had an attacking return yet this season, but genuinely, he looks like Fulham's best attacker. When he didn't start in Game Week 11, Fulham looked really off it, and he came on in the second half and made a real impact as soon as he did. He looks like a really good option. I think Marco Silva is going to favour him, and he's going to start every game for Fulham. He just isn't really getting the attacking returns. He hasn't got any yet, but you can't really ask for much more at 4.5 million. But there is one other player at this price point as well, and that is Freddie Potts from West Ham, who seems to have forced himself into the starting 11 under Nuno. I think, if I remember rightly, he's taken some set pieces, if I remember rightly. The fixtures for West Ham are all right. He's only 4.4 million, so he's actually slightly cheaper than Josh King. But what I quite like about Freddie Potts is that he's averaging 12.1 defcon per 90. So he is averaging over the defcon threshold for midfielders. So that means every time he steps out onto a football pitch, you should be expecting 2 points from him from defcon alone. So, you know, can't get too excited about minimum price midfielders, right? But I think if that's the way your formation in the game dictates the way that you're picking your team, if that makes sense, or the way that your formation is set up, and you need a minimum price midfielder, these 2 guys are pretty much essential. And I think Freddie Potts, with the number of defcon he's putting up, probably slightly edges it at the moment over Josh King. All right, and that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that and found it useful. I've made a few of these essential players in FPL videos, either in pre-season or over the international break, and they seem to have gone down really well. So just want to say thank you for all the support you give me on these videos. It's obviously given me the motivation to make another one because you guys find it so helpful. If you did, please leave me a like rating. Let me know in the comments if there's any players that I've forgotten here. One team that I haven't mentioned very much is Liverpool. They also embark on a really good fixture run alongside Man United, but after that result against Man City, it's quite hard for me to say that any of the Liverpool players are essential at the moment. But yeah, let me know in the comments if there's any players I've mentioned that you think are pretty much essential in FPL. And yeah, if you haven't already, please leave a like rating on the video and subscribe to the Goal to Goal channel to see more content from me. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.